This is Counterpoint, and I'm your host, Tanya Granic Allen. The 2026 FIFA World Cup is over, and while it delivered unforgettable goals, dramatic upsets, and a month of extraordinary football, it also sparked no shortage of controversy. VAR, or Video Assistance Referee, was at the center of heated debate with contentious decisions leaving players, coaches, and fans questioning whether the technology is helping or hurting the game. Concerns over officiating security, fan behavior, the soaring cost of hosting, and the billions of dollars FIFA generated from the tournament dominated headlines alongside, of course, the action on the pitch. But there were remarkable success stories as well. Spain emerged as World Cup champions, lifting the trophy after a memorable tournament that showcased the very best of the beautiful game. Canada enjoyed its best ever World Cup campaign, proving it can compete with the world's elite and giving the country a glimpse of just how far its national program has come in a very remarkably short period of time. Meanwhile, the United States demonstrated once again why it remains a premier destination for major sporting events with packed stadiums, massive crowds, and a celebration of Americana and culture that welcomed millions of fans from around the globe. Today, we'll look back at the tournament's defining moments, the biggest surprises, the standout performances, the matches everyone will be talking about for years to come, and the controversies that nearly overshadowed them. We'll also examine whether the enormous costs borne by the host cities, including Vancouver and Toronto, were justified, while FIFA walked away with record revenues. What legacy this tournament will leave for Canada, we'll have to investigate, and what the 2026 World Cup ultimately says about the global game. Well, joining me now to break it all down is Canadian sports commentator Ryan Eakin. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me today. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's just start with the big finale that just was. So Spain are the World Cup champions. What made them the best team in the tournament, and do you feel this was a deserved victory from start to finish?
Yeah, 100%. To me, people will look back at this as one of the most dominant World Cup performances in, modern history, in my opinion. I think you look at Spain, tactically just dominant. Defensively, they allowed absolutely nothing at any point in this event. Um, you go back to the final match against Argentina, they truly dominated. It really felt like a game between a world power against a team that just happened to qualify. Instead, it
Right.
was you were
What was
facing
that?
Argentina, you were facing Messi.
It was it was
Yeah,
it
I
was
just
so
think it,
boring. Like, it was
yeah.
exciting to watch, and you kind of kept waiting for something tremendous to happen on the Argentina side. And then at the end of it, I was like, What was that?"
I think it was twofold. I think Argentina was not really impressive at any point throughout the event. I think what made them so impressive was their late game magic. They trailed multiple times in that event. They had difficulties against some smaller countries, and they still had those late game magical moments led by Messi. But when you face a team like Spain, you might not even have the opportunity to have that late game magic, and Spain truly suffocated them. It was truly, to me, the most dominant World Cup performance in recent memory.
Okay, let's talk about Canada. So it had its like deepest World Cup run ever. To see Canada, advance, it very clearly shows that they can have a place amongst the world's elite. How significant is this moment for Canadian soccer? And do you think this is just going to continue to perpetuate more growth in this sport here at home?
For sure, I think anytime you host a World Cup and you have success at the World Cup that you host, I definitely think, or at least hope, that for the host country it would have an impact. 2, 3 World Cups like from now, and I think for the Canadian side, it was an impressive event. I mean, as you said off the top, they had their best ever performance, and it was, they lost to Morocco, a world power, but even then, for the first 30 or so minutes, they were the better team in that match. So it was truly a solid event for Canada, especially given the fact that Alfonso Davies, by far and away their best player, was a non-factor just due to his injury. So who knows what could have happened if he played and dominated for Canada. But even then, I think it was an extremely impressive performance, and it didn't leave a sour taste in the Canadians' mouth. I think that was the biggest concerns of Soccer Canada going into this event, was, if this was a dud, what does it do? Given it was
Right.
8 years in the making, but it was far from a dud. Led by that the goal from Eustachio against South Africa, it gave the country a moment. And after hosting a World Cup, you always want to have one big moment, which on the United States side, they weren't able to do, because in Canada, the last moments of the Eustachio goal, but for the United States, the last moment is getting absolutely embarrassed at home by Belgium.
Okay, we only have about 20 seconds to commercial. Where will we be able to watch Canada next on a world stage?
Yeah, the hope is that they're going to play a couple years from now in Copa. They played a couple years ago and lost to Argentina, so the hope is that they get back into that in a couple years.
Okay, excellent. We're going to continue this discussion when we return from this commercial break. Please stick around. Welcome back to Counterpoint. I don't know if you've been watching all that happened in the last month, but World Cup has happened, and the final just emerged, and Spain emerged as the winners. And Canada is super excited about soccer. They did so well. So here to break it all down as to what happened is Ryan Eakin, sports commentator. Ryan, thanks again for joining me. So let's talk about some of the controversies. And you know, I don't like I follow soccer, but I'm not like intricately following soccer. Like I did not know there was an AI sensor placed in the soccer ball. I did not know that we were moving to VAR, video assistance refereeing. But I very quickly learned this as a woman of Croatian descent when Croatia's goal that would have sent the match with Portugal into overtime. There was an AI assisted offside call, which it seemed like a hair follicle touched the ball or grazed it, but in no way, shape, or form changed the trajectory. What the heck was that?
Yeah, this is what happens when you allow every ounce of technology, which, we have plenty of in 2026 into the game because by the technicality, as you kind of mentioned, it was technically the right call, but at the same time, it's what are we what are we doing when it comes to how far do we want to take this? Do we want to come down to every little millimeter, every little inch? And if so, then yes, it technically was the right call. But if you want to take out the human element, if you want to take out the live beauty of sports, one of the best things of being a sports fan is, in my opinion, being able to see a moment happen and celebrate. Now, if you're a Croatian fan in 4 years, you're gonna be thinking after a great moment happens, can you even celebrate yet, or do I have to wait to see if it got reviewed or whatever? So it's a slippery slope, and you saw it on full display. Perhaps no more so than that goal that got taken away for Croatia against Portugal in Toronto.
Oh, it was a terrible. I was down there, and yeah, I was yelling. I was yelling a lot. We're not going to say what I yelled, but I yelled a lot. Another controversy again with this VAR came during the Argentina Egypt match. And Egypt had a goal overturned by VAR after review. Again, earlier incident. There was a whole buildup, but then there was this penalty appeal, and you know the question is like, at what point does VAR do we stop using VAR? Like, how many more minutes back do we rewind and use that as an examination as to, okay, there was a goal. Now, like, did something happen where we should disallow it?
Yeah, it was funny. I was talking to my friends yesterday when I was watching the World Cup game, and my first thing I thought of was you can blame the NHL for this. The NHL it was the beginning of video review, excuse me. And how it all started was Matt Duchene on Colorado was way offside by a mile, and he instantly got a goal off of it. It was a breakaway, but he was clearly offside. And from that point forward, excuse me, they brought in video review. But then it becomes, oh, when a guy enters the zone with the puck and the play happens for another 3 minutes, if the guy was offside by an inch, they'll still call the goal back. And you saw it in the World Cup too. If it's off an immediate play, okay, that's kind of why you want to have video review. But I completely agree with the question. I mean, you went so far back in that one to the point when the goal happened for Egypt, you're not even thinking about the 50-50 penalty that may have happened 2 minutes beforehand, but by the technicality, it was still a penalty. So they were able to go back and overturn it. And you saw Argentina greatly benefited from that. They came back and
Yes.
won. So it's definitely a massive question mark for FIFA moving forward, and really hockey as well, basketball and baseball less so. But it's definitely an issue. I mean, it can't overtake what's happening on the pitch, and you definitely saw that happen throughout the last month.
Well, and if you've followed any of the commentators globally, a lot have been suggesting that this is like really attacking the heart and soul of the game, that you're gutting the sport. When you hear like soccer greats like Henri Thierry and Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who were just appalled by some of these decisions and slamming FIFA's venturing down this horrible path. Uh, on the flip side, though, I do recognize that when there's, if a referee's view is obstructed and they missed a call, I mean, there have been cases in historically where, referees have been, you know, threatened with huge violence, killed. I think there was one that was killed a few decades ago. Like, the consequences are quite severe.
For sure, and again, if you have the technology, by all means, use it, but it has to be for certain moments. For example, I thought they should have done a video review in the final match between Argentina and Spain when Spain had the goal disallowed. I thought that's a play that should have been reviewed and clearly overturned to be called a goal. There was no foul on the play by any means. So that's where you almost want to use it, but then again, it's also up to the official if he wants to use it or not, and it's I don't know. To me, it's the one thing about video review is it's supposed to be objective, but and unlike hockey and soccer, it's still up to the referee if they even want to go to a review, which is subjective. So it's a slippery slope. But I would hope that given the outrage and given how many examples that were provided throughout this last month, I hope FIFA re-examines what they want to do with VAR.
Yeah, because I think a lot of fans have been turned off by what they witnessed, and people are wondering, like, what the heck were we watching here? Is there something rigged? Like, why would one make these calls? We don't know. Anyhow, we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Counterpoint. We're unpacking the World Cup. It's over. Spain has won. And where does that leave us? Well, joining me to help us break it all down is Canadian sports commentator Ryan Eakin. Okay, Ryan, thanks again for coming on. Let's talk about money. Who doesn't like talking about money? So FIFA is expected to generate billions of dollars in profit from this tournament. They always generate profit, I think, pretty much. Qatar was a huge profit, but they estimated initially they would generate 11 billion USD. Smashing this record now, it's expected they're actually going to get 15 billion USD. So congrats to everybody who bought the tickets because you're just feeding these pockets of FIFA. No, like, I mean, I get it. It takes a lot of money to put on this tournament. FIFA is becoming very wealthy as a result. But hey, you and I, Ryan, we're taxpayers in this province where we had, Toronto hosting games. We paid for the FIFA games. We helped pay, and we spent hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars on these games. So is FIFA becoming like way too profitable? I mean, we heard complaints about ticket prices. They seemed out of reach. I mean, clearly Americans were happy to pay for them. It's a little much. It seems a little much.
It is, and it's always been the conversation throughout sport, right? When it comes to the Olympics with the IOC or when it comes to the World Cup with FIFA, is it worth it for these cities to host it? Because you look at Toronto, for example, you mentioned Toronto. On a Friday night, the bar's gonna be sold out anyways, right? And it's not really helping the local economy in that sense. Yes, obviously hotels are a bit more full for sure, and that's a great benefit. But is it really worth everything that comes with security and police and everything that just comes with hosting a World Cup? I don't know the answer to that. So it's always been a battle, and that's why you see countries now starting to decline hosting World Cups and Olympics and what have you. But there's no question North America was eager to host this World Cup, and I guess we'll see down the road if it was a benefit. But you're already hearing that the United States wants to host it potentially again in
Oh,
a couple less than a couple decades from now. So
it
I
was
guess
an
they deem it to
excellent.
be a success,
It
but
was
even then,
It was
yeah.
an excellent PR campaign for the US, and we'll get into that in a moment. But yes, you're right. I think FIFA was so astounded by the profit in capitalist America that they're like, we need to come back and do this again. And of course, there are so many pluses, like they're huge stadiums that are already there, ready to go because of the NFL, the football. Um, but bring it back a second. Like, were the tickets like the dynamic pricing, all this, was it too expensive? Is this the experience in other countries? Did this price locals out who helped spend and invest into this because they're taxpayers and yet didn't get to reap the benefit? It almost seemed like there was too much control from FIFA.
For sure, and again, I think you're starting to see this at a lot of sporting events. Obviously, less so on the club side with the Jays or Leafs, for example, in Toronto, where the team and the ownership dictates prices. But yeah, when it comes to the World Cup, I mean, you look at Toronto; it's not a huge venue. With the expansion of seats, it was still on the smaller side for a stadium. So now you got a ton of demand, not a lot of supply. So that one on its own is a massive issue. And then it comes into FIFA now dictating prices as well. It was a mess. The resale prices were outrageous. Living just right downtown, you'd be looking at prices of the Canada Bosnia game, for example, maybe 10 minutes before kickoff and say, hey, I wonder what someone's selling their ticket for. And it's still an outrageous price in the secondary market. So it's it's tough. And as you said, it definitely priced out the average fan, if not the above average fan. You can be making a nice payday and still not even come close to being able to qualify to buy a ticket or two.
Yeah. Now, speaking of those like parameters set by FIFA, you had a personal experience. Again, there's a lot of control if you want to go in as media, if you want to be a fan, if you want to. Um, if you're, you normally have a advertisement at this venue, you have to have it covered up because you're not approved by FIFA to have advertisement. What happened to you when you were at the Toronto venue? What happened?
Yes, the day of the Canada Bosnia game, which was Canada's first game, it was BMO's first game hosting the World Cup. I got detained and issued a trespassing, and I understand I didn't have a physical media pass at the time, but I was allowed in the spot that I was in by security. And then once it got past that part, TPS, Toronto Police said, well, this is no longer a FIFA issue. This is now a Toronto Police issue. I want to give the benefit of the doubt. I think it was hopefully just first day hiccups in that the staffers, maybe even volunteers, when it comes to FIFA staff, were not on the same page as the security that was laid out by Toronto Police, and much more than that. They had a lot more than just Toronto Police on scene for all the games. So I'm hoping it was just a one day hiccup kind of thing, and maybe they even learned from my experience. But yeah, being detained, it's funny. Obviously, we were talking about Teresa, and she was texting me, being like, "Where are you? Can you get some content in?" And I wasn't able to, given I was detained and eventually sent away. But yeah, it was definitely a day that, looking back after the first day of the World Cup in Toronto, that at least have a story to tell. But yeah, things were definitely not in order at first. I mean, they were asking me if I had a drone. I said no, I do not have a drone. So
Oh,
they
wow.
were definitely thinking of every possible thing they could think of.
Well, and I saw there are some people were protesting about ticket prices in Toronto, and I saw one man was detained for trespassing as well. So it's interesting when FIFA comes. I guess it's all their territory. Anyhow, we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Counterpoint. We're unpacking the World Cup, and join me is Canadian sports commentator Ryan Eakin. Ryan, we have never hosted a World Cup before. Canada, Mexico, and US. That's never been done. It's now over. Do you think we delivered the type of tournament that FIFA was hoping for?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned in your last segment how they out drew their revenue that they were projecting for themselves. So by that answer alone, I'm sure people will say yes. But I think so. I think it was more than just soccer. Yes, we touched on video review and how big of an issue that was, and people accusing FIFA of being corrupt, especially as it related to Argentina and potential bias. But I still think it was a solid event for the fans. Yes, even if they didn't have to go to games because or not able to go to games due to ticket prices, that's still going to always happen at an IOC event, a FIFA event. So I think culturally, it was still a solid event. I mean, Toronto, Vancouver, kind of the same type of cities. One east, one west. But I think people got the Canadian experience a bit. And then in the states, what was nice about the event being in the states was there was just so many cities that hosted it, right? So you had to go,
Yes.
whether it was New York City or whether it was down in Texas. I had a friend that went to the Canada Morocco game down in Texas. That's a different experience than going to a game in New Jersey, for example.
And I
So
don't
the
think
states was a bit more spread out.
The Europeans had any idea what kind of scale of stadiums we have in North America. Like I've been to the University of Michigan Big House, and I think that one's up to like
Yes.
113,000 capacity, which is huge.
Yes.
But like all these NFL stadiums, I mean, there are 70, 80,000 capacities. I've been in some big ones in Europe, but this is like par for the course in America.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Cowboy Stadium, Jerry World in Dallas, that's a huge one. And again, all these teams are pretty on the new side too. There are a lot of them in the last 10, 15 years have come out new. And obviously the Meadowlands, which hosted the World Cup final between Argentina and Spain, that's one of the older ones. But even then, it's just jaw dropping how big of a stadium it is. And then, yeah, they didn't host a game, but you mentioned the big house. I mean, that's the thing. It's not even just the NFL stadiums. The college football stadiums
Oh
are
yeah.
just as big, if not bigger sometimes.
Well, and even the players were commenting how beautiful the facilities were because a lot of them did practice at because they had to have their own dedicated practice fields, and yeah, they were at some of them were at colleges or even high school pitches. It was crazy. It was, I think, a very inexpensive PR campaign for the United States. It seemed like the world was pooing all over, poo pooing the United States just before the World Cup with what's going on in Iran and all over the world, and people suggesting that the U.S. is inserting itself everywhere and they're just trying to take over the world. And then the world descended on America, and they said, "Wow, this is so different." And Americans and these Europeans and the Japanese and the Koreans, it was like a big love fest, and they loved the bottomless gulps. They loved the food, the fried food that was being offered. They were just in awe. I loved going and watching the Instagram bloggers and their reactions to what America was, American culture, if you will.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Obviously, no matter who you think should be in office, who do you want to have in office, once you actually get into it, I think any country, especially any Western country, I think it's going to be a different experience than what you perceive it to be. But also at the same time, whether it's Donald Trump or whether it's another American president, the one thing that always can, there's that term sports washing, right? Where you look at Saudi Arabia, they try to get into golf, and now they're really big into soccer. They try to use that to normalize their country. And I think just definitely no question that the United States attempted to do that too, perhaps successfully as well. Definitely able to showcase culturally a great country, but also politically, It definitely
Right.
helps when you can host an event like this and have smiles on your faces. So it is something you see. I mean, Saudi Arabia's really tried it. They're kind of getting out of golf now. It didn't really work. They were not able to compete with the PGA. But there's no questions that governments definitely use sports to try to, change their image for sure.
And I think expanding it to 48 teams for the first time, like, it was an interesting tournament play, and you just had a lot more of the world kind of looking in. Do you think that was successful? Do you think that was a good move for FIFA, and do you think they'll continue that?
Yeah, I'm a bit afraid they're gonna expand on it.
Really?
I think we found a nice yeah, I mean, you heard some talks they might look expanding. I mean, the FIFA president even came out and said he thinks every country should be in it. That to me is, well, what if you have Argentina face, a country that just has no business playing soccer, right? And then it's like, okay, well, FIFA makes money out of it, no question. They'll make money off an Argentina soccer match. But at what point do you also consider the quality of content that you're
Right.
providing up against just making money? So I think this was a sweet spot. I do think they have to do something about the European side though, because you look at teams in the Middle East that qualify, and then you look at Italy not qualifying. Should the qualifications really be close to being the same for a country like Italy that has to compete with some of the European powerhouses? I don't think so. But at the same time, if Italy beat Bosnia, no one's even talking about that. So at the same time, I think we maybe found a sweet spot in terms of how many countries. I was concerned that was going to be a watered down event, but definitely was not. There's no question the quality of soccer was outstanding, including countries that had no business winning, and they really competed with some of the top powerhouse countries on the planet.
Amazing. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for your content this year. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks for watching.